Ukraine is not a priority for the United States of America.
First of all, the American president needs to have moral clarity.
Who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
I mean, I don't know.
They need to know the difference between right and wrong. They need to know the difference between good and evil.
This is the largest industrial sabotage in history, sent more carbon in the atmosphere than any act ever. And there's weirdly no curiosity about who did it. And I think that's strange.
Do you know who did it?
Seems pretty obvious. It was backed by the Biden administration. If you were running against the Biden administration, to do something like that and shaft our closest allies in the world, which would be Western Europe.
They need to know the difference between right and wrong.
And deprive them of the energy they need to run their manufacturing sector and destroy their economy, which it is in the process of doing. That's a major sin to have done something like that. You just betrayed our allies, and no one on the right is accusing the Bidens of what they clearly did. So I don't know why.
Well, no one is accusing the Bidens aren't being accountable on anything. I mean, you look at the cocaine that was just found in there. I mean, that's a whole nother issue.
Ukraine is a front line of defense. Putin has said once Russia takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. That's a world war. We're trying to prevent war.
Putin and his advisors were never interested in a war with NATO or the United States. That's why you've had such incrementalism, this slow grind of movement forward, defensive operations for a long period to build up the force, and then continued offensive operations.
I would negotiate with the Russians, which is what they've wanted to do from day one. The Russians signed a peace agreement in March of 2022, which we just found out about. And Zelensky initialed it. And the Russians were actually withdrawing their troops in March of 2022 and April of 2022. And President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Kiev to blow up that agreement. And since then, 135,000 kids, Ukrainian kids, have died, and 50,000 Russian kids.
We're trying to prevent war.
When President Biden was asked about what the purpose of the war was, he said regime change in Russia. When Lloyd Austin, his Secretary of Defense, was asked in April 2022, right after they blew up the agreement, why are we in Ukraine? He said to exhaust the Russian army and degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. That is not about Ukrainian freedom.
They have over 300,000 combat troops in reserve in Russia. And I think they're sitting there and not being released to fight because President Putin anticipates the possibility that we will intervene in Western Ukraine. And if we intervene in Western Ukraine, the Russians will be ready for that. And the consequences for us and for NATO will be devastating because we are not ready to fight the Russians.